I need a divorce. Do you offer flat fees? This is a question that we get asked all the time. And I'm gonna be really blunt with you. I think divorce should never be done flat fee. In fact, I think it is against your interest to go with any law firm that is doing this flat fee. It's a really strong opinion, and I do feel really strongly about it. When I have gone up against law firms that do cases flat fee, I have seen some of the shoddiest legal work that I have ever seen. And I am not, crapping on all these other attorneys out there, because maybe there's a law firm out there that is doing this really well, but that is not what I have seen. What I have seen is people will take a flat fee, attorneys will take a flat fee, and then they'll phone it in. Because it doesn't matter whether they do their best work or their worst work, or whether they spend 5 hours on a case or 50 hours on a case. They're getting paid the same either way. So the incentive is there to do it for the least amount of work possible. I've seen attorneys show up unprepared for court, forget to file important things, and to not know their evidence and not really negotiate all that hard. Another thing that I have seen is a divorce. Maybe you guys really agree on everything, and a divorce that somebody took $6,000 for really could have been done in $2,000. And so the person who's doing hourly billing paid $2,000 and the other person overpaid by $4,000. Another thing is it's just a really bad business decision. Remember when I told you that a case could be done in 5 hours or 50 hours for the same fee? Well, if you're offering flat fees as a business owner, you probably have to take on a lot more cases and a lot more clients per attorney in order to just keep the lights on. I get why flat fees are attractive to clients, but you get what you pay for. And it's really important, if you're going to get divorced, to not treat it like amateur hour. You want to work with qualified divorce attorneys that make this their life, that make sure to advocate for you, that will watch your budget, but also will put in the work needed to be the most prepared attorney in the room and to get you results. What's the incentive for a flat fee attorney to get you results? If someone offered you a check for $5,000, and for $5,000 they ask you to place phone calls, and you take their phone and you place phone calls, and you place 2 phone calls, you get the $5,000, or you place 20 phone calls and you get the $5,000. Which one are you going to do? Is that what you want to set your attorney up to, the kind of choice you want to set them up for? I sure as heck wouldn't. When you work with a law firm or an attorney, you're going to be asked to sign what's called a retainer, or in our case, we call it an engagement agreement. This is an agreement between you and the law firm, and it spells out a bunch of things, but here are the really important ones you need to pay attention to. The first thing that it spells out is the scope of work. We are going to be representing you for this specific thing. It might be your divorce, your custody case, your domestic violence case, your prenup, whatever it is. It defines the scope of work that's going to be done, and that has to be very clear in an engagement agreement. The next thing is the financial terms. How much is this going to cost? Is there an initial deposit up front that you have to pay? Are there any additional deposits that you have to pay for trial or depositions or other things? How often is billing done, and how are things billed? The financial terms absolutely need to be laid out. And finally, there's that other stuff, the kind of important things, but they're the terms of engagement. And what I mean by that are things like rules for how you guys are going to communicate, how often you're going to hear about your case, whether or not any outcomes are promised, any responsibility towards appeals, those kinds of things. You want to make sure that you take the time to read the retainer and the engagement agreement so that you understand the relationship between you and the law firm and you and the attorney that you're going to be working with. It's all defined so that everybody is super clear and on the same page. When you work with a law firm, you're likely going to be asked to pay an initial deposit, sometimes called a retainer, up front. That is money that you pay the law firm that they hold in what's called a trust account, an attorney trust account. We collect an amount of money up front to secure your payments, to make sure that you're going to pay our bill, and also sometimes to be able to pay some expenses on your behalf, like filing fees or deposition fees or court reporter fees, anything that is a requirement for your specific case. At our firm, we call it an initial deposit, and we take a specific amount of money up front for the initial deposit, and that is the security blanket. That is like you paying your security deposit on your apartment. So we put the initial deposit in our attorney trust account, and that money is completely separate from the money that we use to run our law firm. That is a requirement by law. It is your money, and it is kept in a safe account. It's an interest-bearing account, and no, we do not get to keep the interest. The interest goes to the state of Maryland to support legal services. But that is where the money stays. and then you get invoiced, and then you pay us the amount of the invoice. And that money is still there to pay your expenses and also to cover you to make sure that you do pay your bill. Finally, at the end of your case, the initial deposit is applied to your last invoice, and anything remaining you get back. Divorce is expensive, but it is more than just the cost of your attorney's fees. There are some other costs that you really need to keep in mind. One involves the cost of your actual divorce, and one is the cost of moving on. So some of the costs of your actual divorce I want you to keep in mind are as follows. There's going to be some filing fees. Here in Maryland, it's $165 to file for a divorce. There may also be some additional fees for things like if you need a court reporter at any point, if you need to get documents from the other side and you need to serve with a subpoena, so you might have to pay for the cost of, per page for banks, for example, to give you a bank statement. You may need to pay for a process server to serve the other side. So these are some ancillary costs. There might be some bigger costs. If you need to hire an expert, for example, you may have to pay expert fees. If you need an evaluation of some kind, maybe you need the value of a home or the value of a business, or you need a custody evaluation. This is another type of expert that you may have to pay. So keep in mind, litigation can honestly be as expensive as you decide to make it. I have heard some crazy expensive cases because it's kind of like a menu. If you order everything on the menu, your bill's going to be really high, but you don't have to order everything on the menu to eat. So think about your budget when you're choosing and when you're meeting with your attorney and your legal team, deciding your strategy. But that's not all. So those are just the costs involved of actually getting divorced. Then there's the costs of your new beginning. Stuff that you have to think about that's not necessarily related to your legal case. You might have to think about the cost of movers. You might have to think about the cost of a realtor if you have a house to sell. If you have kids or if you're having a hard time with your divorce, you really want to consider a therapist. And honestly, even if you're not having a hard time with your divorce, you might want to consider the cost of a therapist anyway, just to make sure you are in the best frame of mind to have a wonderful new beginning. You may want to consider a meeting with a financial advisor or two. After all, you now have to save for retirement or kids' colleges or a bunch of other things with an entirely different set of financial circumstances. And having a second set of eyes really can't hurt. Finally, when you're ready to get back out there, you might want to consider the cost of a matchmaker or a plastic surgeon if you want to touch things up, or maybe even just some facials or some new clothes. Anything that's going to help you feel good about yourself and feel really, really great heading into your new normal. So, lots of different costs associated with getting a divorce, but you know why divorce is expensive? Because it's worth it. How do you choose the right attorney for your budget? Well, it's a complicated question because you do want to consider your budget for your divorce when you are figuring out what to do. But I'm going to tell you this. I personally don't think that you should consider your budget when you choose which attorney or which law firm to hire. You want to choose the best attorney that you can afford. And divorce litigation specifically is kind of like ordering from a menu. There are so many different options. You can send subpoenas, you can take 1 million depositions, you can hire an expert for children and finances and an expert on the cost of houses and an expert on, children's schools. You can go soup to nuts and go absolutely crazy and spend all of your money and then some. But you really don't need to do that. So what I would rather you do is go to a really fantastic attorney or law firm and look at their menu and pick the cheaper things on the menu, because they're still going to have that amazing attention to detail because their reputation of that really good restaurant and that really good law firm still matter. That's better than going to a cheaper restaurant that's going to give you indigestion and heartburn. Because let me tell you, hiring an amateur or hiring a really crappy attorney that's going to phone it in, that's going to give you a whole lot of indigestion and that's going to give you a whole lot of heartburn. So when looking at your budget, look at the case strategy, look at the menu of options that you have chosen, and that's where you define your budget. The best attorney you can afford with a case strategy that matches your budget. Remember, your divorce is an investment in your future, and you don't want to cheap out. And if you think it's really expensive to hire an expert, try hiring someone that's going to mess it up. It'll be a whole lot more expensive to fix. How do you choose a divorce attorney for your budget? Well, I think there's a simple rule. You choose the best divorce attorney or best law firm that you can for your budget. When you are going through a divorce or child custody circumstance, you can really spend a lot of money. I've seen people blow their entire budget and then some, doing every little thing in a divorce. You can hire experts on pretty much anything. You can depose the other party. You can depose your neighbors, their bosses. You can depose anybody who has anything possibly to say about your soon-to-be ex or your children or any of your financial circumstances. The cost of divorce can be astronomical and wild. When you hire a really good lawyer or a really good law firm, they're going to help you come up with a strategy that gets you what you want. Well, they're going to get you the best of what they can for what you want and your circumstances, but they're going to make sure that they're helping you towards your new beginning. When you hire a sloppy law firm and you walk into their office and you see files on the floor, you see paper files at all, you aren't getting responses back, and you see that the other side is sending emails and you're not hearing from your attorney. So my advice for budget is this: hire the best lawyer or law firm that you can. Hire quality representation and work with them to choose the menu items, the strategy items that will fit your budget and still get you what you need.